Mother died today, or perhaps it was yesterday. I don't know. Albert Camus is the father of absurdism. He defined the absurd as the futility of a search for meaning in an incomprehensible universe devoid of meaning. In other words, absurdism arises out of the tension between our desire for order, meaning, and happiness, and on the other hand, the indifferent natural universe's refusal to provide that. Quote, "You will never live if you're looking for the meaning of life." Camus believed that once we accept that there is no meaning, the conflict between a desire for meaning and not finding one is resolved. Or at least that is what Google says. In my understanding, what Camus was pondering is how a creature that is run on meaning can emerge and survive in a universe devoid of that substance. Indeed, an absurd situation. Well, I believe the second presupposition of his question, that meaning does not exist in the universe, is incorrect. However, I could argue belief all day long and we would not get anywhere. So let us grant Camus the argument that meaning is only illusory and man simply makes it up. In essence, a quite classical dig at belief. How does one create meaning out of thin air? How can one convince oneself, fool oneself, to see meaning where there is none? Can you, for example, persuade yourself that a boring class is interesting, or that a minimum wage job that you hate is essential to your life's purpose? Are you even capable of convincing yourself that you like pickles when you do not? Even if you were to be brainwashed into liking pickles, would not something deep inside scream in rebellion? I suppose the previous sentence can be turned around against me. It can be said that precisely, strange man on YouTube, we have brainwashed ourselves as a species to find, to imagine, microscopic ant-like meaning in life, but deep inside we hear the sober screams of despair. Quote, "Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible." Viktor Frankl chimes in. Albert was right that one should not search for meaning in life, but he stopped short of an answer which Frankl found. Camus, as brilliant a man as he was, never seemed to find a way out of his adolescent thinking. It seems that he stopped at the first question, whether to live, and never made it past that. Quote, "There's only one really serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." This fascinating statement, which I like greatly, to be fair, symbolizes perfectly what I mean when trying to understand Camus. This quote screams rebellious adolescent thinking. Quote, "The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion." End quote. Perhaps that is why his work resonates best with teenagers and young adults. He did with me as well. If you will excuse my absolutist statement, the universe is completely devoid of meaning only for those who have not taken enough responsibility for and in their life. Meaning shines forth. It is not to be created or imagined. Meaning grips you suddenly and unexpectedly. It is your horrifying task to now follow it. It is not you who needs to ask for the meaning of life, rather you must answer. I do not wish to moralize or lecture you individuals watching this video on how to live, and I hope it does not come across as that. I only mean to counter Camus' argument on meaning. Anyway, I would like to take a necessary detour and share my own experience with absurdism. I was enthralled with the myth of Sisyphus, and trying to incorporate acceptance of the absurd had an unexpectedly relieving effect. For a while. Look, Camus' observation about the absurdity of human life looked at from the universe's scale is eye-opening and largely correct. However, perhaps a human is not meant to constantly evaluate things from the universe's eyes, but rather his own. Of course, everything is folly from that far. How do you yourself perceive the existence of ants with your own eyes versus using a magnifying glass? Nevertheless, for argument's sake, let us keep going. Camus' answer to the problem of meaning, if we disregard suicide, is to embrace the absurd, to stop trying to find meaning or purpose, accept fate, embody Don Juan, and experience all that is possible. After all, what else is there of life than experiencing as much as possible? For some time, I accepted the absurd and tried to live according to this experience everything philosophy. It went along with my own worldview well, anyway, until I read Irvin Yalom's Becoming Myself, a book that does not have anything to do with absurdism, and suddenly everything came crashing down. Yalom's book is his autobiography, The Memoirs of a Psychiatrist. In summary, Yalom lived an unfathomably productive and successful life. It seemed to me that he experienced all that a person, not to mention a psychologist, could hope for, and I, a psychology student myself, related fully. However, as I finished the book, a vacuum appeared. So what if Yalom experienced everything? At the end of the book, he's 90-something years old and still he faces death that seemingly will erase everything. So again, what of his experiences? They are now just sentences in a book. This is when the shallowness of absurdism hit me, boiling existence down to mere living for living's sake. That is the illusion. That is the fooling of oneself. It is the philosophy of adolescent, egocentric, hedonistic rebellion, and no wonder Camus used Don Juan as a symbol for it. It is the abandonment of responsibility, precisely the opposite way to finding meaning. Yalom's meaning in life was not his vast experiences and memories. Those will fade with him. His meaning, if it is not too conceited of me to speak for him, is the huge family he fostered. It is the countless people that he bolstered, whether during his consultations or through his books and lectures. It is the imprint that he left on psychology through his persistent and diligent work that now enlightens someone like me 50 years later. There is your meaning of life. You will not find it in yourself. Meaning is what is beyond your vain existence. Psychologically and symbolically, this understanding symbolizes the transition from adolescence into adulthood. Again, a transition which I do not believe Camus made. Look, this essay, although I did not intend to do so, turned out to be quite harsh on Camus. My criticism is not meant to discredit his work, especially his novels. If anything, with the framework I put him in, his novels stand as a brilliant encapsulation of a certain psychological developmental stage. My essay aside, his novels shine light on a fundamental human problem, and that is more than most authors are capable of. He himself was not as one-sided as I probably have painted him here. You can find quotes of his that would contradict my thoughts here. Camus was actively and genuinely wrestling with the problem of meaning and shared the process, and that is what makes him great. Furthermore, it should not be expected of a short video to encompass all of Camus' work, and even more so the whole of absurdism. My goal with writing these essays is to firstly honestly try and answer questions for myself. For example, a question of why something seems off with absurdism. And secondly, by sharing the results to provide worthwhile entertainment for you. In essence, I am doing the same as Camus did. With everything said, I believe everyone should read Camus for themselves. Make your own conclusions. Happy rebelling.